I found a dark family secret in an old portrait, and it cost me everything. Reddit stories. I never liked my father. I suppose that's a harsh way to start, but it's the truth. When people speak of family, they paint their sentences with warm colors. Safety, laughter, support. My memories, on the other hand, feel gray, as if everything about my childhood was filtered through overcast skies. My mother tried. God, she tried. But there's only so much brightness a person can generate before the darkness next to them devours the rest. My father wasn't abusive in the traditional way. No bruises or broken bones, but silence has a violence of its own, and neglect, especially the kind served cold and daily, can hollow a child in ways that take decades to name. I grew up in that hollowness, and when I finally left at 18, I promised myself I'd never return, not for birthdays. Not for funerals. Not even for closure. Some wounds fester best in solitude, but promises made in rage have a tendency to decay, especially when the past comes knocking dressed as something benign. Mine arrived one quiet afternoon in the form of a cardboard box. It was early spring, the kind that still has winter's breath clinging to its ankles. I lived alone, had a stable job designing book covers, and had somehow managed to make my one-bedroom apartment feel more like home than the two-story house I grew up in ever did. When the knock came, I almost didn't answer. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I generally avoided uninvited guests. But something about the rhythm on the door. It wasn't impatient or threatening, just persistent, got me up from my desk. I opened the door to find no one, just the box. Brown, taped shut, no return address. Only my name, scrawled in neat handwriting I didn't recognize. I don't know why I brought it inside. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe something deeper. A hum beneath the skin that told me this was no ordinary package. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, and ran a cutter along the tape. Inside, nestled among layers of tissue paper, was a single object, a framed family portrait. My heart stuttered. It wasn't the photo itself that unsettled me. It was that I had never seen it before. In the image, we were seated on the old floral couch that used to sit in the den. My father on the left, mother on the right, and me in the center, no older than 10. All three of us were smiling. That was the first red flag. We didn't smile like that. Not together. Especially not in that house. The smiles in the photo were too easy, too wide, like someone had cut them from a magazine and pasted them onto our faces. I scanned the background, the furniture, the wallpaper. Every detail was accurate. It was our house. But I couldn't recall the moment. Not the clothes, not the photographer. Nothing. Just static. I flipped the frame over. On the back, in the same neat handwriting as the label on the box, was a date, April 23, 2003. My 10th birthday. That should have meant something. But it didn't. I couldn't even remember having a party that year. I turned the frame back around and stared at our faces. And that's when I saw it. There was a figure in the hallway behind us. Faint, almost ghost-like, but unmistakably human. Just a sliver of a face peeking from the shadows, watching, smiling. A fourth person. My breath caught. I checked again. No mistake. Someone was in that hallway. Someone I had never seen before. The logical part of my brain kicked in. Tried to reason through it. Maybe a neighbor. A family friend. Someone who was there, unremembered and harmless. But deep down, I knew that wasn't right. I couldn't explain how, but I knew. The way a bird senses a storm before the clouds roll in. This person didn't belong. I put the frame down and stepped back. My heart was hammering now, a war drum in my chest. I stood in the center of my apartment, surrounded by quiet, and felt an overwhelming urge to call my mother. We hadn't spoken in over 5 years. The falling out had been mutual, an unspoken agreement that distance was better than wounds. But now I needed answers. It rang 4 times before she picked up. Her voice was older than I remembered, warier. She didn't sound surprised to hear from me. "You got the picture, didn't you?" she said, skipping any pleasantries. I froze. "You sent it." A pause. "Not exactly." "Then, what does that mean?" There was another pause, longer this time. Then she sighed. "It's time we talked about the house." "What about it?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked, "Do you remember your 10th birthday?" I hesitated. "No, not really." "That's because it didn't happen. Not the way you think it did," but the line crackled with silence. Then she said something I'll never forget. "There's a reason we never took family photos. Your father didn't allow them. Not after that day. Not after what happened with the guest." I asked her what she meant, but she only said she'd tell me everything, in person. She didn't want to talk about it over the phone. She gave me an address. Not the old house, but somewhere new. A small town I'd never heard of. She told me she was staying with someone, that I should come alone, that she'd explain everything. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, the photo on my nightstand turned face down. I couldn't bear to look at it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face in the hallway, smiling. The next morning, I packed a bag and started driving. The town was 3 hours away, nestled between two hills like a secret. Her directions led me to a white bungalow with chipped paint and lace curtains in the windows. I knocked. My mother opened the door and hugged me, which was strange in itself. She'd never been a touchy person, but this wasn't a warm hug. It was the kind you give someone right before something terrible. We sat at her kitchen table. She poured tea. Her hands trembled. "Tell me," I said, "what happened that day?" She looked at me for a long time, eyes searching. Then she began. "You were born with something different, a kind of sensitivity. You used to talk to someone. An imaginary friend, we thought. You called him Gray. Said he lived in the walls. We brushed it off. Kids have wild imaginations. But then, on your 10th birthday, we found the guest room open. The door we always kept locked. Your father swore he'd locked it, but inside, someone had set the table. 3 cups, 1 extra. And there was a cake, not one we made. I didn't say anything. My skin prickled. We tried to take a photo. Your father thought maybe it would snap you out of it. He said if we posed like a normal family, you'd stop talking to Gray." But when the photo developed, her voice broke. "There he was, watching, smiling." She paused, tears now tracing lines down her cheeks. "That was the day we left. Your father burned the photo. Or thought he did. But I kept a copy. I needed proof. I needed someone to believe me. Because after that day, we were never the same, and neither were you." I leaned forward. "So why send it now?" "I didn't," she said. "I lost that photo years ago, thought it was gone. Then, 2 days ago, it was on my doorstep. In that same box, addressed to you. I went cold." "There's more," she whispered. When I flipped it over, the date had changed. I stared at her. "Changed to what?" She swallowed hard, then said, "Tomorrow. I didn't leave that night. Maybe I should have." Any rational person would have taken that photograph, doused it in lighter fluid, and tossed it into the deepest pit they could find. But I've never claimed to be rational, especially when the past is involved. Trauma doesn't move in straight lines. It circles back, digs tunnels, waits for cracks. And now that crack had split wide open. I couldn't unsee the face in the hallway. Couldn't unhear my mother's words, so I stayed. I slept in the small guest room with faded lilac wallpaper, lying awake as shadows crawled across the ceiling like slow, moving hands. Every creak of the house pressed against my ribs like an old memory threatening to resurface. My mother didn't sleep either. I could hear her pacing the floor. She said she didn't want to be alone. Said the photo coming back meant something. Something was stirring. Watching again. At 3:33 a.m., the sound came. A dull knock. 1, 2, 3 on the guest room door. I froze. The hallway was dark and the door was shut. The knock didn't come again, but the silence that followed was heavier than noise. I sat up, not breathing, listening to the house hold its breath with me. And then, faintly from behind the door, came a sound I hadn't heard in over 15 years. A low, slow giggle, childlike. Familiar. It was my voice. I didn't open the door. I waited until morning. Over breakfast, my mother looked pale. She didn't ask how I'd slept. I didn't tell her. The atmosphere between us felt brittle, Like if we said too much, the air would shatter. We didn't mention the knocking, not yet. Instead, she pulled out a shoebox wrapped in a blue scarf and slid it across the table. "These are yours," she said. Things I couldn't throw away. Inside were fragments from a past I barely recognized. A small metal toy car, a birthday card with stick figure drawings, a crumpled school photo of me missing 2 front teeth. Beneath it all, a small cassette tape in a clear plastic case, labeled simply Gray. I picked it up with shaking fingers. "You used to talk to him all the time," she said quietly. "Then one day you stopped. We thought it was over. But the tape. You recorded this yourself. You wouldn't let us listen. That we didn't have a cassette player." I didn't ask why she'd kept it, or why now, after so many years, she was giving it to me. I knew the answer. The date on the photograph. Tomorrow. Whatever it meant, she believed it was connected. And so did I. I drove to the nearest antique store and bought a dusty old cassette player. When I returned, the house seemed dimmer somehow, like the walls had grown thicker in my absence. I sat in the living room, the player on my lap, my thumb hovering over the play button. "You don't have to do this," my mother said, standing in the doorway. "I think I do." I pressed play. Static at first. Then, a rustling sound. A child's voice, mine, emerged, soft and hesitant. "He, Gray. Today was weird. Mommy cried again and Daddy didn't come home until the moon was out. But it's okay. You said the game will make it better." I looked up at my mother, who looked like she'd just heard a ghost speak. The recording continued. "I did what you said. I drew the circle and put the old coin in the middle. But the doll melted and now it smells like the basement. Are you mad? You said not to open the closet until the tapping stops. But it didn't stop. I opened it anyway. I saw your real face." There was a pause. Then, in a lower, garbled voice, barely human, something else spoke.
Huh?
"You looked at me wrong." I slammed the stop button. The tape ejected itself. Literally, popped out like it had been spat. My hands were shaking. "I don't remember that," I whispered. "You weren't supposed to," my mother replied. "You changed after that night. You started sleeping with the lights on. You wouldn't go near mirrors. And you stopped drawing. We took you to a therapist. You didn't speak for 2 weeks. A memory flickered. Just a flash. Crayon drawings with too many teeth. A voice whispering from inside a wall vent. A closet door that always clicked shut even when I left it open. "What happened to the circle?" I asked. She looked away. "We found the floorboard charred beneath your rug, like something burned through it. But there was no fire. Your father blamed the heater. He stopped sleeping upstairs after that." The rest of the day passed in a haze. I walked the perimeter of the house several times, unsure what I was looking for. Every window seemed to reflect too much, like the world inside was just slightly misaligned with the one outside. As the sun dipped below the trees, painting the sky a bruised purple, I made a decision. I would go back, to the house I swore I'd never return to. I didn't tell my mother. I knew she'd try to stop me. But something was pulling me back. Something deeper than fear. A thread I hadn't realized was still connected. If the photograph had changed its date to tomorrow, maybe something was waiting for me at the source. And if this thing, Gray or whatever it was, had roots in that house, I needed to cut them. I arrived at the old place just before nightfall. It hadn't aged well. The roof sagged, the shutters hung like crooked teeth, and the mailbox was jammed with leaflets from 5 years ago. But the front door was still there. Still painted the same deep green. Still bearing the scratch I made as a kid trying to carve my name. I slipped the spare key from behind the loose brick in the porch, where I knew it would be. Some patterns never change. The air inside hit me like a wave, stale, dusty, and tinged with something sweet and rotten. The house creaked in greeting, old bones shifting in their sockets. I walked through the foyer, past the coat rack and into the den. The couch was gone, the wallpaper peeled, but the shape of the room was unchanged. I knew exactly where we sat in that photograph. I stood in that spot and turned slowly, trying to find the exact angle. When I did, a strange chill passed through me, like the air was thinner here, hungrier. I moved toward the hallway, toward the shadow where that face had been. The guest room door was closed. I hesitated. The doorknob was dusty, untouched. I placed my hand on it and felt a tremor run up my arm, like the house was shivering beneath my skin. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was empty. Just a bare mattress, a broken lamp, and a cracked mirror on the far wall. But in the corner, something waited, a box, just like the one from before. I approached it slowly. It wasn't taped shut. The flaps were open, inviting. Inside was a stack of photographs. All of me, all from birthdays I don't remember having. Age 11, age 12, age 13. In each photo, I was older. And in each photo, the same figure lingered behind me, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but always smiling. The last photo made me drop the stack. It was a picture of me now, in my apartment, taken from the hallway outside my bedroom, and behind me as I sat at my desk was gray, not a child, not a man, something between. Tall, too tall, with limbs that didn't match and eyes like hollow moons. His mouth stretched too wide, like it had been drawn on with ink. He was reaching for me. I stumbled back, breathing hard. That's when I heard it again. The giggle. Only this time, it wasn't behind me. It was inside my head. And then the lights went out. The light snapped out so fast it felt like reality blinked. One moment I stood in the dusty guest room staring into the face of something that shouldn't exist. And the next I was swallowed whole by shadow. The kind of darkness that doesn't just obscure sight, it eats it. My first instinct was to bolt, to tear down the hallway and out the front door. But the air had changed. It felt syrupy, heavy, like the atmosphere itself had thickened, pressing against my limbs with invisible hands. My muscles resisted every movement, as if I were wading through a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, nearly dropping it in my panic, and thumbed on the flashlight. The cone of light cut through the darkness, illuminating peeling wallpaper and the open box of photographs. But the photo of me at my desk, it was gone. I flipped through the pile, heart pounding. 11, 12, 13, each one a birthday I didn't remember. Each one with gray getting closer. But the final photo, the one that felt like a warning, not a memory, had vanished as if it had never existed. That's when I heard the sound again. Not the giggle this time. A low, guttural scrape, like something dragging across wood. It was coming from downstairs. I crept out of the room, trying not to make noise, though each step on the brittle floorboards betrayed me with sharp cracks. As I reached the top of the staircase, I pointed the beam downward. Nothing moved. But the scraping continued, rhythmic and deliberate, like it wanted me to hear it. Like it was calling me. The living room was unchanged, except for one thing. The fireplace was lit. I hadn't touched it. Hadn't even been in this room since arriving. But now orange flames lit the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls like twisted marionettes. And in front of the fire, someone had placed the couch. The couch. The same floral, patterned one from the photo. It was intact, pristine, like it had been plucked from a different time. Arranged in front of it were 3 chairs, facing it like an audience. A performance waiting to happen. And on the couch sat me. 10-year-old me. His legs swung slightly off the edge, not quite reaching the floor. He wore the same blue sweater I vaguely remembered hating, his hair parted awkwardly to the side. And he was smiling, not the fire, not at the room, at me, the adult me. My mouth went dry. "Who are you?" I whispered, but the boy didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head slightly like I just asked a very silly question. I stepped closer. "What do you want?" Still no answer, just that same expression. An impossible mix of innocence and something else, something cruel beneath the surface. My own eyes stared back at me, but there was no recognition in them. No soul. Then the fireplace flickered and I saw it, a hand, emerging from the shadows behind the couch. Thin, bone white, elongated. It rested on the boy's shoulder, almost tenderly. I shone the flashlight directly toward it, but the beam seemed to bend, to warp around the figure that stepped forward. It was gray. Not as a child, not as a monster, but something in between. Something that looked human at a glance until you looked too long. The body was wrong, like bones had been arranged in defiance of anatomy. The skin was pale but translucent, revealing hints of movement beneath, like insects shifting under rice paper. And the smile. God, the smile. Too wide, too knowing, as if it had always known this moment would come. I couldn't move, couldn't run, could barely breathe. "You invited me?" Gray said, voice like wind scraping through a vent. "You played the game." "I didn't," I managed to say, barely louder than a whisper. "You did," he crooned. "And you've been playing ever since." He raised one hand, long fingers outstretched. The boy version of me, the hollow copy, mimicked the gesture. "This is your gift," Gray said. "Every year a piece of you came back. Another birthday, another smile." "No," I said. "That's not real." But Gray cocked his head. "Then why are you here?" The fire flared, and suddenly I was back in the hallway, standing before a mirror I hadn't seen in years. The mirror from the guest room. Only this time, I wasn't alone in the reflection. Behind me stood a dozen versions of myself. Ages I didn't remember, birthdays I didn't celebrate. Each of them smiled. Each of them held something, a candle, a balloon, a card, a piece of a puzzle I didn't know existed. They were offering them to me. "No more gifts," I muttered. "No more birthdays." I turned and ran. The house howled behind me. Doors slamming, walls groaning, glass shattering. It was collapsing in on itself, as if my presence had broken something sacred. I sprinted down the stairs, past the couch, past the fire, past Gray. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at myself. I burst out the front door into the night. The cold hit me like a slap, but the air was real. Crisp, alive. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, started the engine, and peeled out of the driveway like a man possessed. Only once I was halfway down the road did I allow myself to look back. The house was dark again. No fire, no glow. Just a dead structure under a dead sky. I didn't go back to my mother's. I drove straight to a motel 2 towns over, paid cash, and locked the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. They didn't feel like mine. None of this did. At some point I must have passed out because I woke to the sound of a phone buzzing. Not mine. A landline next to the bed. I picked it up. "Hello?" No answer. Just static. Then softly, "Happy birthday." The line went dead. I checked the motel clock. Midnight. April 23rd. I stood, heart thudding in my throat, and moved to the mirror in the bathroom. I turned on the light. I wasn't alone. Over my shoulder, faint but clear, stood the boy from the couch. He raised his hand in a wave and smiled. I slammed the door shut and punched the mirror until the glass fell like snow. That night, I burned every photograph in the box I'd taken from the house. I deleted every birthday photo I'd ever had on my phone. I wiped every trace of myself from social media. I even legally changed my name. For a while it worked. I moved states, changed jobs, cut off all contact. But then last week another package arrived. No return address, just my name, inside a new photograph. Me. Now. At my desk. And behind me, always smiling. Gray. I tried to convince myself it was a prank. That someone had hacked my phone, found an old photo, photoshopped it, mailed it as some elaborate joke. But the problem was, it wasn't old. The photo in the envelope was too current. I hadn't worn that hoodie until last week. The angle, the lighting, the way my window framed the cloudy sky behind me. It was exactly how the room looked that Tuesday morning when I spilled coffee on a manuscript. The image wasn't just taken, it was witnessed. And the hand on my shoulder wasn't human. It's strange what terror does to time. I couldn't tell you what happened that day after opening the envelope. I know I stood still for a long time. I know I stared into the photo as if I could burn a hole through it with my mind. At some point, I must have showered, must have eaten something. But my memory doesn't restart until hours later, when I found myself parked outside the library. Not just any library, my childhood library. The one I used to sneak off to after school. especially when I didn't want to go home. It was barely holding together these days. Graffiti on the siding, the smell of mildew clinging to the carpet, the old microfiche readers collecting dust like tombstones. I hadn't been inside for nearly 20 years, and yet here I was, walking its aisles like no time had passed at all. My body led me there without asking my brain. I wandered to the back corner, past the children's section with its half-torn beanbags and faded REOTUCED posters. My fingers ran along the spines of forgotten books as if one of them might whisper a secret. And then I saw it. A book I didn't remember, wedged between two copies of The Wind in the Willows. No title on the spine. Just a dark green cover with strange embossing, swirls and geometric shapes that seemed to move when I tilted it. I pulled it out. The cover had no author. Just one word, printed dead center in gold foil. Grayling. The name tickled something buried. Not a memory, but something older. A feeling, like the static before a lightning strike. I sat on the floor and opened it. The pages were yellowed but soft, like they'd been turned many times. The text wasn't typeset. It was handwritten in neat, looping letters, the kind you might find in a diary or a spellbook, and the first page read, "To welcome Gray, the child must play. The backward candle lights the way." My mouth went dry. The next page was worse, a crude drawing of a boy in front of a mirror surrounded by symbols. Below it, more writing. "1. The world forgets your age, Gray remembers. He comes bearing gifts. Each birthday is a door. Burn it backward. Step through." I closed the book and hugged it to my chest like a shield. Burn it backward. I remembered the tape, the doll, the circle, the coin, the game. I hadn't just imagined Gray. I had invited him, year after year, without knowing. Each birthday a ritual, whether I remembered it or not. And now he was collecting. The librarian found me still sitting there when the lights flickered to signal closing time. I shoved the book into my coat and left without speaking. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain and rotting leaves. I barely made it to my car before I started crying. Not out of fear, out of confirmation. This thing, this presence, I wasn't imagining it. I hadn't outgrown it, it had grown with me. I drove back to my apartment in silence. When I got home, another envelope waited at my door. No name, no return address. Inside, a birthday candle, blue, twisted, burned at both ends, and a card. "You're almost ready. Let's make a wish." I didn't go inside. I couldn't. Instead, I walked. For hours. Through alleys, down empty streets, past glowing convenience stores and midnight laundromats. I walked until my legs ached and my thoughts stopped swirling. I found myself back at the motel from before, the one I'd fled to after visiting the house. It looked smaller now, less like shelter and more like a trap. But I checked in again. The same room was available. Inside, I spread the book on the desk, lit the desk lamp, and studied the pages under its buzzing fluorescence. Rituals, riddles, warnings. The book was a manual of sorts, a guide for grayling hosts, as the author called them. Children who opened the wrong doors, said the wrong names, drew the wrong shapes, and there was a way out, not a reversal, not an exorcism, a trade. The section was titled "The Hollow Swap." It described a ritual that could sever Gray's hold on a host at a cost. It required an item from the day of the original game, a space of reflection, and the backward candle to be lit at midnight between two mirrors. The host had to look into their own eyes and speak a phrase. The phrase was smeared, unreadable, but next to it was a sketch of something I remembered, my childhood bedroom. More specifically, my closet, the one that never stayed shut. I left the motel the next morning, candle in hand. The book said I needed an item from the day of the first game. I thought I had nothing, until I remembered the metal coin I'd kept as a keychain charm through college. I still had it, in a junk drawer back at my apartment. When I got there, I found it exactly where I remembered, dulled but unmistakable, an antique Austrian groschen, 1954. I didn't know why I'd used it that day, as a child, to start the game. Maybe I thought it looked magical. Maybe Gray told me to. It didn't matter now. That night, I did everything the book instructed. I set 2 mirrors facing each other in the bedroom of my apartment. I placed the candle between them. I held the coin. And at exactly midnight, I lit the candle. The flame moved strangely, not flickering but pulsing, almost breathing. The mirrors reflected endlessly into one another, and deep in that infinity, I saw movement, shifting shapes. One by one, they stepped into view. My younger selves, every age, every face I didn't remember clearly, each staring at me with eyes like glass marbles. And then him, Gray. He emerged at the center of the infinite reflections, crawling toward me with that smile stretching wider and wider. I gripped the coin so tight it cut into my palm. The candle's flame turned black, and from the deepest mirror, Gray spoke. "You burned the years," he whispered. "No, let's count them." The candle exploded in a hiss of smoke. The room spun. My vision went white, then silence. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my apartment. I was in my childhood bedroom, not as it looked now, as it looked then. The posters, the scratchy carpet, the old nightlight glowing faintly, the smell of childhood, the mix of crayons, plastic toys, and safety. I turned slowly. In the mirror was my 10-year-old self. He looked terrified. "Please," he said, "don't leave me here." Gray stood behind him, both hands on his shoulders. "I want to go back," I whispered. "You never left?" Gray said. "You fractured." Then he stepped aside. A choice? Or me? One could walk away. The other would stay. It wasn't fair. But Gray didn't deal in fair. I stepped forward and said goodbye to myself. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of my apartment. The mirrors were gone. The candle was nothing but a scorched mark. The book gone too? But the coin was still in my hand, and I was alone. No giggle, no knock, no photo since. I thought maybe I'd done it, but this morning on my birthday, I got a text from an unknown number, just a photo of my future. Me, old and gray, sitting at a table. Gray behind me, smiling, waiting. "You can convince yourself you're free. You can burn the photos, change your name, even erase birthdays from your memory like chalk on pavement. But the truth doesn't care. The truth waits, and it always finds a way back." After that last message, after seeing my own future captured in that impossibly precise image, I didn't sleep for 3 days. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself as an old man, hands trembling on the table, that thing. Gray, looming behind like a shadow with skin. I tried to tell myself it was a nightmare, a premonition, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion or buried trauma. But when I ran the image through metadata software, out of desperation, out of obsession, there was no EXF data, no camera model, no time or date, just one word embedded in the code. Confirmed. I threw the phone against the wall. It didn't break. Nothing does when you want it to. That night, I took down every mirror in the apartment. Not just covered, removed. I didn't want portals. I didn't want reflections. If Gray had used mirrors to get close, I was cutting off his passage. But even with the glass gone, I still caught glimpses of him. Not directly, in windows, in the gleam of spoons, in the black sheen of my turned-off laptop screen. Just out of focus, always watching. I knew then what I had to do. The ritual hadn't worked the way I'd hoped. I hadn't severed the tether. I'd only confirmed it. Cemented the contract, maybe. Made it official. I needed help. Not from therapists. Not from priests. From someone who knew Gray, and there was one person who might. My mother. I hadn't spoken to her since I left the house that day. Since I fled the photograph. But when I called, she picked up on the first ring. "I thought you might," she said. Before I even spoke, "Have you seen him again?" I asked. Silence. Then, never left. I drove back to the bungalow where she stayed, 2 hours away from the apartment. When I arrived, I noticed something immediately. Every window had been painted over. Not boarded, painted in thick black brush strokes, like tar. And on the porch, a circle of salt and pennies surrounded the doormat. She let me in without a word. The living room was dim. No lamps, just a single candle lit in a jar on the floor. "You brought him closer," she said, motioning for me to sit. I didn't mean to. He was always close. But now he has a path. She handed me a photo album, I almost recoiled, expecting more twisted birthday memories. But this album was different. It wasn't mine, it was hers. My mother as a child. Blonde curls, gapped teeth, a smile I never remembered her wearing. The pictures were in black and white, most of them faded, some warped by age. But there was one constant. In every picture, no matter the year, there was a boy. Not in the center, not clearly posed. In the background, watching. His name was Elias, she said. That's what my grandmother called him. But I knew him as Gray. He was always there, from my 3rd birthday until my 12th. Then he left. Or so I thought, and my mind reeled. So you played the game too? She nodded. Different time, different version, but the same invitation. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? I couldn't answer that. She opened the album to a page I hadn't seen yet, a picture of her. No older than 8, standing in front of an arched wooden door I didn't recognize. This is where I ended it, she said, or tried to. Where is that, I asked? She hesitated. The door was never in our world, but sometimes places remember it, places with old bones and older shadows. She handed me a slip of paper with an address. A rural town in upstate New York, the kind of place that doesn't appear on maps unless you already know where it is. Go before your next birthday, she said. He'll come to collect. The town was called Gallows Trace. Population 312. It didn't have a gas station or even a diner. Just a church, a post office, and a general store that sold more dust than groceries. But it had the door. It wasn't hard to find. The address led to a long, abandoned boarding school nestled at the edge of a forest that felt older than language. Vines devoured its walls. Trees bent unnaturally around it, as if recoiling. The gates were open, though rusted shut by time. I had to crawl through the hedges to enter. Inside, the building was silent. No birdsong, no insects. Just the long, slow breathing of wood and stone settling into rot. The door waited on the 3rd floor, exactly as in the photograph. Arched, Karen, hinged. It had no handle, just a keyhole. I stood before it for what felt like an hour. Then I took the coin, the old groschen, and pressed it into the keyhole. It turned. The door opened inward. The space beyond was not a room. It was him. Gray was the room. The walls were skin-stretched over beams of bone. The floor was layered with teeth. Hundreds of baby teeth, all gleaming white. The ceiling pulsed like a throat. And in the center, on a chair made of mirrors and wrists, sat Gray. "Welcome home," he said. I stepped forward, fists clenched. "You followed my mother. Now me? What do you want?" He smiled. "You called me. You built me. Each birthday, you carved me deeper. But you're not real." I snapped. His grin widened. "What is real?" "A photograph, a memory, a game." I looked around. Reflections of my face stared back from every mirrored surface, aged, deformed, warped. Some smiled. Some wept. "Then what's the point?" I asked. "Why the photos? Why follow?" He leaned forward, impossibly tall now. "Because your life is a gallery. I am the curator. I collect what you forget." I backed away. But he didn't move. "You can leave," he said. "But leave something behind. That's the price." "Like what?" He raised a single, bony finger and tapped my temple. "A year, a memory, a name, something precious." I shook my head. "Nope." "Then stay." I turned. The door was still open. The light from the hall flickered. I could leave. I had to leave. But what would I lose? He answered before I could ask. "If you walk now, you will forget your mother." I stopped. The weight of that sentence slammed into me like a truck. You won't know her face, her voice, her name. She'll knock at your door and you'll think she's a stranger. But tears burned in my eyes. What? Why her? Because you know the path because of her. That memory opened the door. It's the tax. I dropped to my knees. Was this salvation? Or surrender? I thought of the photo album, of her sacrifice, of the blacked out windows and the salt circles. Maybe she had already paid. Maybe now it was my turn. I stood. "No," I said. "I won't forget her." He frowned. "But I'll trade." I reached into my coat and pulled out the last item I had, a picture. Me and my father. One of the few we ever took together. I had kept it, despite everything, a fragile reminder that he had tried in his own damaged way. "I give you this," I said. "Take him instead." The Gray's grin split into something obscene. The floor opened beneath me. I fell. Fell for hours, until I landed back in my apartment. The photo was gone, but so was every memory of my father. His voice, his laugh, his name, nothing. I checked the drawers. No photos, no documents, no trace. I called my mother. "I missed you," she said. "How's the city?" I hesitated. "Do you remember, Dad?" Silence. "Then, you never had a father." And the line went dead. I sat in the dark for a long time. The mirrors were still gone. But now, every time I walk by a window, I don't see myself. Just a boy. Alone. Smiling. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from absence, but from erasure. A void where something once was, and you know it, even if you can't name it. That's what losing my father felt like. Not death. Something deeper. Something surgical. A clean cut in the timeline of my life. No grave, no grief, no trace. Just an empty slot in my memories, like a pulled tooth I kept tonguing, hoping the pain might remind me who he was. But there was nothing. My mind recoiled from the question every time I asked it. It was like reaching into a drawer that used to hold scissors and finding it now filled with salt. Gray had accepted the trade. He'd taken the memory as promised. And for a few days, things were quiet. No new photographs arrived. My mirrors, carefully reintroduced one at a time, reflected only what they should. I stopped checking the metadata on images. I stopped dreaming of doors. It felt like a ceasefire. Not peace, never peace, but a silence thick enough to breathe in. I even visited my mother. We met in a small park halfway between her bungalow and my apartment, a neutral space where no memories lived. She looked better, less brittle around the edges. She brought me a thermos of tea and a scarf she said she found in her attic. It wasn't mine, but I took it anyway. We didn't talk about Gray. We didn't have to. Some ghosts don't like their names spoken aloud. But I had questions, even if I didn't ask them out loud. And one night, as I lay in bed, the ceiling cracked by passing car lights, I realized something. If Gray collects what we forget, then where does he store it? That was the thought that kept me awake for weeks. Because if my father had truly vanished, if every birthday memory had been carved away and hidden, then somewhere, a place, a realm, a gallery, must exist that held the echoes of every sacrifice. And if that place existed, I had to see it. Not out of defiance, but because I couldn't bear not knowing. I started with the book, Grayling, the green, titleless volume I had found at the library. It had disappeared after the ritual, but I hadn't checked the library since. Maybe it had returned there. Maybe Gray wanted me to find it again. So I went back. The library hadn't changed. Still crumbling, still holding its breath. The same librarian sat behind the desk, though he looked at me this time like he recognized something in my eyes. "I'm looking for a book," I said. He nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting the question. He didn't ask for a title. Just stood, walked to the back shelves, and returned with a dust-covered volume wrapped in butcher paper. "Don't open it here," he said. "Not under this roof." I didn't ask why. I took the package, tucked it under my coat, and left. At home, I unwrapped the book carefully. It was Grayling, exactly as before. Same cover, same gold lettering. But this time there was a bookmark, tucked into a chapter I hadn't seen before. The Museum of the Forgotten. The chapter described a place that existed sideways to time, built not of brick or bone but abandonment, a dimension formed by the fragments people leave behind when they forget. Not just memories, but entire identities, paths never taken, words never spoken. A city constructed from the pieces of selves that no longer existed, and it was guarded by Gray. The chapter ended with a ritual, a dangerous one. More dangerous than the candle, more dangerous than the mirror. It required a photograph of yourself as someone else, a self that never was, an alternate version, and it needed to be burned. Not to destroy, but to unlock. Fire, the book said, is the key that cracks the shell of truth. I had no such photo until I remembered a dream. Months ago, maybe longer, I'd woken in a sweat after seeing myself in another life, married, a daughter. A small house by the sea. It wasn't real. I had no child, no partner. But the dream had felt more me than anything in years. On a whim, I used an AI generator. I fed it a prompt me older, holding a little girl standing by a coastal cottage. I uploaded my face, aged it slightly, added a smile I didn't quite believe in. The result? A photograph of a life I'd never lived. I printed it out. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, lit a candle, and held the photo over the flame. I offer what never was, I whispered, to enter what remains. The photo curled inward, blackening at the edges. As the smoke rose, so did the room. Not literally, but my senses began to slip, sound muffled, light bent. The walls pulsed, then folded like paper, revealing a corridor of fog and frames. And suddenly I was there, in the museum. The sky was colorless. The floor was mist. But the walls, oh, the walls, they were made of memories. Photos hung on invisible nails, some of people, some of places, some of moments caught mid-laughter or mid-sob. Each shimmered slightly like wet film. I walked past images of lives I didn't recognize but knew had once belonged to someone. Then I found the first one. My father, younger than I'd ever known him. Smiling, arms around a child that wasn't me. A version of his life before I was born, maybe, or one where I had never existed. I reached out to touch the frame, and it breathed. "Don't do that," said a voice behind me. I turned. It was gray. Only not the gray I remembered. This version wore a long coat made of stitched, together photographs. His eyes weren't glowing or monstrous. They were tired, ancient. "You've come to take," he said, not angry, just disappointed. "I came to see," I replied. He walked past me, running fingers along the frames. "They all come to see. Some want their fathers. Some want lost lovers. Some want names that were never theirs. But none leave unchanged. I need to know what you do with them," I said. "The memories, the trades." He stopped at a frame and tapped it. "This one is a woman who traded her grief. She wanted her husband's death erased, and so she lives happy, but hollow. She laughs at jokes he never made." He moved to another. "This one gave up his guilt. He killed someone. The memory ate him. He gave it to me. Now he's free. But every mirror shows blood." I walked alongside him. "Me." He stopped. "You," he said slowly. "Here a museum piece still being assembled. What happens when it's done? You stop asking questions." That chilled me. I turned to him. "Can I have something back?" Gray raised an eyebrow. "I want one memory of my father. Just one." He stared at me for a long moment, then reached into his coat and pulled out a tiny frame. He handed it to me. Inside was a single second, my father lifting me into the air as a toddler laughing. I didn't remember it, but I felt it, the warmth, the joy, the simplicity. I held it close. "Thank you," I said. Gray only nodded in return. He whispered, "You must leave behind another bar." I nodded. "What?" He smiled. "The girl, the one from the dream? The daughter you never had." I froze. "She's not real," I said. "She was possible. That's enough." The frame in my hand flickered, and the one behind me, the AI-generated photograph, cracked. Then the world dissolved again. I woke on my apartment floor. The candle was out. The dream photo was ash. And in my hand was a real photograph. Me and my father, laughing. I remembered him, his voice, his smell, his terrible cooking. But when I went to sleep that night, the dream of the girl didn't come. The house by the sea. Going. Her face. A blur. The name I'd given her vanished. I'd traded my future for my past. And Gray, the curator of all our could-have-beens, had made the swap with a smile. He always smiles, because he always gets what he wants. There are two kinds of silence in this world. The first is empty, dead air, forgotten corners, untouched rooms. The kind of silence that simply exists, unnoticed. The second kind is full, dense, charged like the moment before a storm splits the sky. That's the kind of silence I live in now. Every breath feels like it echoes, not through space, but through time. Like the air remembers something I don't. like every molecule around me is waiting to see if I'll remember or forget. I remember my father now. The trade with Gray. One life for another, one forgotten path for one retrieved, was supposed to settle the debt. I had walked through the Museum of the Forgotten, stared at faces that once were mine, glimpsed a future I had never touched, and I had walked away. That alone felt like a miracle. For weeks afterward, I didn't see him. No whispers, no giggles, no photographs on my doorstep. It was as if Gray had withdrawn back into whatever realm he governed, satisfied with the exchange. I started going outside again, answered phone calls, made plans. I even framed the photo he gave me, the one of my father tossing me into the air, caught mid-laugh. I didn't hang it. That felt too fragile, too final. But I kept it by my desk, facing me, a relic not of the past, but of the cost it took to recover it. I'd touch it sometimes, just to reassure myself that it was still there, that he was still mine in some small way. But even miracles rot when you look at them too long. It started with the reflection. Not in a mirror, those were still gone, but in a window, a harmless, clear pane above the kitchen sink. I was doing the dishes one night, half listening to music, and I saw my reflection. Only I wasn't moving. I froze, stared, and so did the version of me on the other side of the glass. Until it smiled, I dropped the plate. It shattered. The sound broke the moment like a scream in church. I looked back at the window. It was just me, moving as I should, eyes wild, face pale. I convinced myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, trauma residue. The mind plays tricks, especially when you teach it to forget. But deep down, I knew what it was. A crack in the frame. Gray was returning, but this time something was different. It wasn't like before. No packages, no hallucinations, no games, just slips. Time hiccups. People forgetting mid-sentence. A man on the street calling me a name I didn't recognize. The sound of my door unlocking in the middle of the night, without it opening. I checked the locks. They were untouched. And then the dreams came back, but not of the girl by the sea. This time I dreamed of myself. Hundreds of versions, some younger, some older, some barely human, all trapped behind glass, banging to get out. And behind them, always behind them, Gray, his grin now tired, like he'd eaten too much. Like I was giving him indigestion. I woke one night to find my apartment rearranged. Not entirely, just enough. The couch moved slightly left. A book I hadn't opened in years now lying spine up on the table. The framed photo of my father, missing, in its place, an empty frame. No glass. No back. Just the wooden border. I ran through the apartment in a panic, every light on, calling out for something I couldn't name. And then, in the hallway mirror of my apartment building, one I hadn't removed because I never looked at it, I saw it. My father, not the version from the photo. The real version, older, sad. Alone, staring through the glass like it was a window, not a reflection. I reached out, and he mouthed a single word. Trade. I staggered back. Gray's game wasn't over. It never was. The memory I reclaimed hadn't satisfied him. Because memory is alive, it grows. You can't just have one moment. Once you remember someone, you remember more. The smell of their cologne, the way they knocked twice before entering, the last thing they said before leaving. You open a door, and the rest pushes through. Gray wanted the rest. And now he was tearing seams to get it. I had two choices: lose the memory again, or find the original frame. Not the one on my desk, the one from the first photo. The one that should never have existed. I knew where it had to be. The house. The one I swore never to return to. Again. It was boarded up now, listed for demolition. The real estate company couldn't sell it. Unstable foundation, they said. Structural damage. What they didn't say was that neighbors heard laughing from the second floor. That lights flicked on at 3:33 a.m., even when power was cut. That every real estate agent assigned to the property quit within a week. I broke in at midnight. The lock had rusted but gave way with a firm twist. The air inside was wet and sour, like mold and memory had been breeding unchecked. I walked straight to the den. The couch was gone, the fireplace empty, but the wall where the photo had once been taken, still there. And something waited. a small indentation in the drywall, like a hook had once been there. I pressed my hand against it, and the wall gave way. A hinge, a hidden panel, a box. Inside, the frame, the original one, still holding the photograph. But the image was blank. No people, no house, no background, just white. As I touched it, the frame pulsed. Like a heartbeat, I heard laughter upstairs. My laughter, and I realized what was happening. Gray wasn't just feeding off memory anymore. He was using it to rebuild me, to remake every version of me that had ever existed, and every one that hadn't. 100 selves, 1,000, all contained in a gallery he could open and rearrange. Unless I broke the frame. But not just physically. I had to break it metaphysically. Unwrite it. Erase the idea of the photo. The moment day. The smile. My hand trembled. Because I knew what that meant. I had to forget it all again. Not just the photo, but my father, my mother, the daughter I never had. Everything. All of it. I took out the groschen, the last physical link I still had, held it over the frame, and whispered. I release the image. I unframe the memory. I forget the shape of the day. The photo inside the frame darkened. Not black, not ash, just absence. And then the frame collapsed, the house groaned. And from upstairs I heard one last giggle. Not Gray's. Mine. Then silence, real silence. The kind that's truly empty. I woke in my apartment, the couch where it had always been. No photo, no frame, no memories of the ritual. My shelves were in place. The window reflected only what was there. My phone had no unknown messages. And in my hand, a clean coin. No engraved, no date, just a blank silver disc. I tried to remember who gave it to me, but I couldn't, not quite. Only one thing remained, a note on my desk in my own handwriting. 4 words, do not take pictures. I still don't know how it ends. Maybe this is the ending. Or maybe I'm still in the frame, still being curated. But one thing I do know, when you look at a photograph and see someone smiling in the background, don't ask who they are. And whatever you do, don't smile back. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe and like the video.